We go. All right, guys.
Fair warning.
Fair warning. Don't do anything, Frank. We got you. We're gonna have it documented. Now let's see why I can't move it. There we go. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to be fly fishing on the Deschutes. That's the major river that goes kind of north-south in Oregon. The dates are going to be May the 19th through the 23rd. So we'll go through the day-by-day itinerary, but basically we're going to be fishing for 4 days and camping for 3 nights. Located in central Oregon there. We picked the dates because kind of how these dates came about is Max called me up probably a month ago and said, hey, I've got a group that's been going on those dates for 10 years. And the reason they do that is because that's pretty much the hatch. And they've had to cancel this year. And he asked me, said, if I put a group together real quick this year. And I told him that I already had all the trips, I was going to do this year booked. But I said, I want those dates for next year if they've been doing it for 10 years. And so he hesitated for a second. He goes, okay, you can have those dates. So we got the dates that some groups had for 10 years now. So it's going to be a float, wade, and camp trip. So basically what it's going to do is we'll show you you cannot fish from a boat in the Deschutes River. So what we'll do is we'll put in, and I'll show you pictures here in a minute, then Landon can go more to details. We'll float down to a place where we're going to wade fish. We'll wade fish it and get back in a boat, put in or go on down, get out, wade fish it again, and continue doing that through the day until we get to our takeout location at night. While we're doing that, there's going to be other boats going down and they'll have the camp set up when we get there. And so here is Madras, Oregon. So we're going to put in about 30 minutes north of here, somewhere up in this particular, you can barely see the Deschutes River here. So we're going to be put somewhere north of here. So Madras, Oregon, for airports, you've got the Redmond Airport, which is down here, and it's about 30 minutes away from Madras and about 30 minutes away from Bend. So that's kind of the Bend Airport. You got the Portland, Oregon Airport up here, and that's about 2.5 hours down to Madras. And like I said, the Trout Creek put in is somewhere up here about 30 minutes. We'll just say it's right there. That's where we're going to be putting in on the first day. And then we'll float the river and then take it out. So this river actually flows from south to north. So we're actually going to be going the opposite direction than down to here. We're actually going to be going in the opposite direction. And Landon, please interject anytime.
Sounds good. No, you got everything correct so far.
All right. So here's what'll happen. The first day one, we'll arrive in Madras or wherever you want to overnight at. Madras has a few hotels there. It's not a very big place. It has a few hotels there. So you may want to, I don't know if you want to go as far away as Portland to do it, or you want to go down to Bend. If you're down in Bend, then you're going to be an hour plus away. If you're in Portland, you're going to be 2 hours plus away if you want to spend the night somewhere the night before. And then what we'll do, first thing in the morning, we'll meet the guys that Trout Creek put in, which is about 30 minutes north of where I had Madras. And then we'll start floating the river. We'll float the river, fish it overnight. Then the next 2 days, we'll float the river again, wade it, overnight it. And then on the 4th day, we'll do that again, but at about 2 o'clock, we'll actually take out. And when we take out, so let's say we have rental cars there. When we take out, they will have the rental cars shuttled down to our takeout location, or shuttled up, I guess, to our takeout location. So as soon as we get off the water, our rental cars will be sitting there for us. And then at that point, you're off on your own doing whatever you want to do. So here's pictures of the trip. So here's pictures of boats that will be used, or similar boats that'll be used to transport us down the water, and then also to transport the gear down the water. And then this is going to be kind of what a campsite looks like. It'll be, a 10 by 10 or 12 by 12 tent, canvas style, Montana style tent. And then they'll be cooking, whatever else they're going to do there. Now, Landon, tell us a little bit about the takeout spots. Some takeout spots will have compost toilets there. Kind of what's your experience on that?
That is correct. So just real quick, that very first top left picture is actually the Trout Creek put in.
Okay.
So that's where you'll stage for the day. That's where it starts. And then where you're at on that top right picture of the next campsite there, that is actually, I recognize it very well. It's known as Ponderosa Camp. And it's in a string of other camps that are kind of in there, but that's the big one. And there's very few Ponderosas on the river itself. So that's one area that those trees actually grow, and that's how it got its name. But to your question and your point there, with the compost toilets, they're known as Phoenix toilets, and it's a hardened structure. It's basically a concrete path that leads all the way up to it. I mean, you're kind of weaving through the dirt paths there that have been created by various campers and essentially your anglers and rafters. But once you get up to the main structure, that's where you have that kind of causeway that gets you up there. And it's a simple, basically you drop pine shavings in after you do your business, and it's this natural organisms in there that are breaking down all the compost, and they're very clean. They don't stink, which is super nice. It's just a very, very clean, but they're well maintained. There's a gentleman from the Bureau of Land Management that comes through, and he actually, I think every 3 days, roughly, he'll come through and he floats the river. And funny story, his name is known as Two Ply because the BLM is actually very cheap and usually gives you the single ply stuff, but he is a gentleman and a scholar, and he brings 2-ply and installs that into all the toilets down there. So everybody loves him for that reason and knows him as 2-ply. So that's kind of the rundown on the toilets down there.
I like him already.
There you go. Keep going.
More
keep
than
going,
one,
man.
or just more than one, or just one per all of us?
There's generally 1 or 2, depending on the campsite at each one. So there are some campsites on the river itself that do not have one, but generally speaking, most of the outfitters, we try to avoid that overall, and they try to camp strictly at the ones that do. So that's kind of the program overall. And yeah, like I said, just depending on the campsite itself, some have 2, some have 1, but it's one of those things when you're having your early morning coffee and you're getting ready for the day, you want to scoot up there and try to beat the crowd if you can. Just a little tip.
So how many people will be on the trip? I know that's maybe a question you're going to cover later, but generally how many people will go?
Yeah, it'll be either 6 or 8.
Be in the campsite and on this.
For us, there'll be 6 to 8 people on our trip. I don't know how many more people this accommodates there, Landon.
So I would say for your trip specifically, you're right on point. But as far as anglers on the river, the Bureau of Land Management also restricts, and that's why you have to purchase a boater's pass for each trip. So they try to regulate how many individuals or recreators are on the river at any given time. But every campsite's different depending on how much they can hold. Some are a total of 6, some are 8. I think the max that you can actually have at a couple of them is like 16, but those are kind of far and few between, where majority are definitely in that ballpark of, I'd say, around 8 to 10 per campsite.
8 to 10 people.
Correct.
So we'll have our own campsite. Generally, there will not be other anglers there at the same time.
There can be. The caveat there as well is basically these campsites are first come, first serve.
Wow.
So what we used to do as an outfitter, the old outfitter I worked for, we had our, what we called our baggers or our support crew that would set up the camp. They'll go down to the camp before you even get there. They'll have everything set up for you before you guys arrive. So you'll fish throughout the day. They'll have the camp already set up. And basically what we used to do is we would have at least 2 supporting baggers, if you will, and you would essentially help tear down as much as you could collectively, and then one of them would actually shoot off early. to go secure the next site. And then the secondary individual would just finish packing what they could and then load their boat and head down and meet up with that individual later.
So if we're in an area where we cannot get where a BLM compost toilet's located. So what do we do then?
I don't think that'll be the case, but
Okay.
the BLM also requires each outfitter and any boat for that matter, they have to, if you're at a campsite, you have to have some sort of toilet that you are bringing down yourself. So as an outfitter, we always carried some sort of kind of big curtain that would cover the toilet itself. And then you utilize what is known as a wag bag. And that's what gets installed into the toilet itself. So you put in the bag, do your business, and then you simply just close the bag, seal it up, and throw it in the trash.
All right, so that's enough about the bathroom. Let's go fishing.
All right. Tell us about the fish here on the left, Brandon or Landon.
So the species of trout that resides primarily in the Deschutes River is known as a red side. And it is a subspecies of rainbow trout, and predominantly just this specific one is endemic to the Columbia River Basin and primarily the Deschutes River. So there's a couple other rivers that flow into the Deschutes a little farther upriver or south of where you guys will put in. But for the most part, yeah, primarily as your rainbow trout species is going to be the red side down there. They're super hard fighting fish and they're known for that. They tend to be a bit shouldery compared to standard rainbows. They definitely give you a run for your money. So playing them well and not putting too much pressure on them is always a good thing. As far as other species in the river, you have plenty of whitefish, which is always a good indicator of a good river system or trout stream, what have you. It's a good indicator species that it's a healthy river overall. So you'll run into those if you're nymphing. They tend not to eat dries at all. So that's be one species that if you're curious about catching a whitefish, definitely pull out the nymph rig and try to get some that way. There's also the yellow belly sucker. That's another one in there. They fight super hard, but they're just, as a sucker fish, they're not terribly pleasant. And one of those species that a lot of folks don't like catching, but once you do, I always enjoy catching them because they fight super hard and it's kind of cool. And then there's also bull trout in the river as well. The bull trout aren't as quite as common to catch. There's very few, I'd say, overall in the river. It's just the Deschutes itself isn't something that lends as far as the river goes to those fish flourishing, so to speak, in there. But you do catch them on occasion. They'll eat dries, especially during the stonefly hatch. You'll definitely get some fish as far as bull trout that'll come up and smash a dry, and that's always cool. And they'll eat nymphs and all that good stuff. They're primarily streamer eaters for the most part, but they're opportunistic as well. To tag on to that, as far as bugs that you'll see on the water. So you're mainly there for the stonefly hatch itself. There's two stoneflies in particular that everybody is really focusing on, and that's the Pteronarcis, which is the largest species, and that's your salmon fly. And then there's also the golden stone, which is a little bit smaller, but as far as size, the salmon fly is really, really big. I mean, they get as big as like 3.5 inches long, whereas the golden stone tends to be like on the big side is maybe 2 inches, but you'll see those plenty flying around. The hatch really kicks off when those bugs have mated, and then the females get their eggs. They get a big cluster of eggs that they deposit on the end of their abdomen, and then what they do is they oviposit them, so they fly around, and you'll see them randomly. You'll see the bugs everywhere, but they'll randomly just touch down on the water and then fly off the water, and that's just a female that's coming down, dropping an egg sac in the water, and then she's taken off as fast as she can, trying not to get eaten by a hungry trout. Some of the other species that you'll see is yellow sallies. That's another kind of really, really small stonefly, not to be overlooked. That's one that sometimes I'll trail a big bug, and then if I feel like casting 2 flies or if an angler's up for it, you can trail a little yellow sally off there. And a lot of times the fish will just pass on the big salmon fly, if you will, and then they'll smash that yellow sally, which is always cool. Another thing is, especially this time of year, if you get one of those mornings where it tends to be like a little foggy on the river and you can just feel kind of moisture in the air, you'll start seeing green drakes pop off. And when the green drake hatch comes off, if you're lucky enough to experience it, those fish will just go absolutely wild for that mayfly. And I've seen where you'll have the big bugs like the stoneflies on the water and green drake hatches coming off, and those fish will literally pick the green drakes in between the stoneflies. Like they'll avoid the stoneflies altogether, even though that's the big steak, so to speak, but kind of the filet mignon, if you will, is that green drake, and they'll come up and eat that, which is always cool. Another cool opportunity this time of year is it's kind of the start of when the caddis are getting hot and heavy. So depending on weather and how hot it is during that time of year, basically it's really fun in the afternoons. Like when you get to camp, you'll see huge clouds of caddis. So you can run around with your dry fly rod if you haven't had your fill by the end of the day, and you get to camp and you want to go throw some more dry flies. Definitely have some stone flies with you, but you'll see just big clouds of caddis, and sometimes you'll see fish just plucking away at caddis on a certain stretch of bank. So that's always fun to have as well. That's kind of the bulk of, I'd say, the fish species as well as the insects that you'll see on the river and really focusing on. But I'd say in a nutshell, everybody wants to throw dry flies, and that's the most fun and exciting thing to do. Throwing nymphs is also successful during that time of year, so don't hesitate to do that if things tend to be a little on the slow side. And obviously your guides are keen and will know what's working best and what to do. But Bobby and I kind of talked about this previously. One thing to practice, or at least get familiar with, is the bow and arrow cast. And if you go on YouTube or anything like that, definitely look up that cast itself, because what these bugs are doing for the most part is they're either up in the grass or they're hanging out in the trees and they're doing their thing, they're mating, they're getting friendly with each other. And what happens is sometimes they're a clumsy bug for sure. So sometimes when they're crawling from branch to branch, they'll fall off underneath the trees, and you can see in the top left, there's those on the opposite side of the river left, there's kind of that big overhanging tree there that's above the boats. That would be an area, exactly. That would be an area that I personally would be looking to target. And it's fun where you can actually get in there and you can be at a rod's length and literally hold your rod out, hold the fly in your hand, and you'll hold it by the bend of the hook, and you'll get it back as far as you can and just let it go and slingshot it or bow and arrow cast it in there. And next thing you know, a fish that's 10 feet from you just comes up and smashes that fly. So it's a great cast to have in your arsenal. But a lot of times you're kind of casting the grassy banks, stuff of that nature. To be accurate is always nice, but at the same time, you don't have to have a real delicate presentation, especially with the stoneflies. You want that thing to flop and make as much noise and splash as possible, so that way it gets those fish attention and they know, oh, here's another meal coming down.
Tell us a little bit about the area right there. I mean, you can see it's an arid area. Tell us about that area of Oregon.
So it's known as high desert, all Central Oregon for the most part, and especially as you're moving north, it tends to become drier and more canyon-esque, especially once you're in the Deschutes itself. It's absolutely gorgeous country down there. You kind of see it on that bottom right, where that individual is sitting there fishing that little riffle. So it's super, super cool. As far as wildlife goes, Definitely be on the lookout for bighorn sheep. There's the bighorn sheep in that canyon itself. So one little tip as far as looking out for those, and I wouldn't hesitate to bring a pair of binoculars as well with you if that's something you're interested, because a lot of times you'll just be floating down, and as you're looking up kind of high, sometimes they'll be really close to the water if you're really lucky, but for the most part, they're a fairly timid animal. So they'll be up and about, kind of up on those canyon walls that you see kind of in the top left. But what you're looking for as you're looking up there, the bighorn sheep itself, on their rump, it's just all white. So you just, what I always look for is just kind of their white butt sitting up there. And you'll see, like, once you're kind of floating down, you'll see like a group of 4. You just see little 4 white clumps sitting there. And you're like, oh, there's some sheep. But your guides are always looking. They always enjoy sharing that with folks that are coming down. And that's something to look out for. On the other side, there's wild horses down there that, so River Left is all part of the Warm Springs Confederate tribe. And there's horses that used to be part of somebody's ranch or homestead there and ended up escaping. And then now there's actually a wild population down there. So it's cool to see those horses. And they are in fact wild, just kind of doing their thing. And that time of year, you'll see some smaller foals and like the babies running around. Another thing, on a rare occasion, and I usually see them more in the fall than I did in the spring, but there are technically a pack of wolves that reside in that stretch of river. And occasionally, if you just keep your eye out, I've seen them about 3 or 4 times throughout my years of guiding. That's kind of rare, but you will see some wolves, and they kind of just do their thing and don't bother anybody by any means. The one thing you do have to be cautious of, and I think Bobby's I think we were getting to it maybe in the next slides, just while we're on it to cover. Definitely when you're out, and your guide will definitely be on top of it, but always just keep an eye out where you're stepping. The Deschutes River, being that it is a high desert, does have a population of Western diamondback rattlesnakes. The thing that I caution about that area is the rattlesnakes themselves, and to me it almost seems like reverse evolution, is they don't tend to rattle that much. There's some that will rattle for sure, but then there's some that don't. So to just make sure that your head's on a swivel and you're constantly kind of just checking where you're stepping. When you're on the bank, generally you won't see them when you're in the water for obvious reasons, but they don't swim well at all. But yeah, as you're kind of making your way up and along the bank, just make sure you're kind of, if you have a walking stick, kind of probe around and make sure you're not walking in a path of a rattlesnake. But they are there, and generally speaking, virtually, I mean, it's very, very rare. I don't think my 6.5 years guiding down there, I don't think there was one case of somebody getting bit by one outside of somebody's dog. But it's one of those things that you generally don't have to worry about.
Landon,
Alright.
how many times typically in a day will you stop and fish?
It depends on the stretch, but for the most part, what I typically would do is you might, for this type of fishing, you're working specific spots, and depending on how many overhanging trees like this one that are in a specific area, kind of dictates how many times you will make a stop. But I used to kind of move a bit when I was doing this, where before lunch you might hit, say, like 4 or 5.
Okay,
On the low end, you might do 3 stops if the fishing's pretty good in a certain area. But then second half of the day, you can kind of expect just the same. So
okay,
you might make 6 to 10 stops a day.
okay, that makes sense.
We'll really watch this video, and then we got a little bit more. I mean, we can always ask more questions. If you look right here on this guy's, you've got a salmon fly right here on this guy's shoulder right there. Anyway, we'll watch this video, and I'm not sure if this is a video you saw or not, Julia.
It is, and I don't know how he didn't get his ear.
I agree.
From a trout's point of view.
Exactly. That's Trout Creek right there. Wild horses. This is the grass I'm talking about where you'll see a lot of these bugs just parked just like that one. You see a bunch of husks as those stoneflies move from the river and they make their way up onto the banks. Sometimes you'll see them hatching, which is always cool.
While we're watching this, can you talk about water temperature, air temperature, weight rods we need to take and so forth?
We got that
Sure.
coming up, Frank. But go ahead and talk, Landon, if you want to.
Absolutely. So
There we
the,
go.
yeah, your main rod of choice, especially with throwing the dries, is going to be a 9'5" weight. That's the 100% what you'll use the most. And when it comes to nymphing, generally a 6 weight, just because you got a little bit of, you can use split shot on the river. So just to deal with a little bit heavier rig, 6 weight works just fine. 9'6" weight, I tend to like, especially for nymphing, if you have it, like a 9.5 or a 10-footer. That just helps turn over rigs a little bit easier. But I'd say the main focus on this trip is definitely going to be the dry fly. So your 9'5" weight is going to be the front runner. I do know some folks that like to throw 6 weights as far as like a 9-footer for the dries, just because big bugs to turn it over. But predominantly any type of 9'5" weight that you have will do just fine.
All right, water temperature, air temperature, that time of year.
Oh, right. So as far as air temperature goes, you're probably going to be in, say, roughly mid 60s, maybe mid 70s. Just depends year by year. It generally doesn't get super, super hot. There's been some years where it might climb into the 80s, but as far as the water temp goes, usually the magic number for the hatch to start is going to be right around 52 degrees. So it'll be somewhere in that 52 to say 56 range. 54 tends to be, I think, the most historic kind of average as far as water temps go. But yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at as far as temperatures go, both air and water.
So we're doing waders. I mean, we watched the same video last night. That's one bad Indian right there. He knows how to fish. So waders versus what they're doing right there.
So I tend to wet wait a lot during that time of year. It's warm enough to where even when you're out there in water like this, where it's 52 to 56, it's still comfortable. It can get a little bit cold on the legs, but to me, it was always comfortable enough to be wet wading. If you're more comfortable being in waders, by all means, it doesn't hurt. I mean, you'll just layer lighter underneath, like wear a pair of shorts and some socks with your waders, and then maybe a t-shirt or a type of technical fishing shirt is always nice. But there's a missed fish. And you'll find too, just same thing like standard dry fly fishing. I mean, these fish come up and they eat it very aggressively, but at the same time, you're still wanting to give that pause of waiting a little bit for that fish to eat, take, and then turn. And then that's when you want to set on them. That was a good fish there. I know Bobby and I kind of talked about this. Average size of like your typical average fish is probably in that 8 to 12 or 14-inch range. And then when you start to get into kind of your medium size, bigger fish like that one, you're pushing up into kind of the high teens. And then a really big red side on that river is 20 inches or bigger, but like a 23-inch red side is a really, really big fish down there. But again, they're very shouldery. They fight really hard. So just be ready when, depending on size of the fish, they'll fight you pretty hard. But as far as the leaders go, you're generally running like 3X, sometimes 2X, just depending on what the guide's feeling there. So you have a little bit of insurance there where you're using some thicker tippet. And this time of year, they're not terribly leader shy or picky when seeing the leaders. It's just, they just want to see the big bug, and when that happens, they're on it. He's got a salmon fly on his hat. That might freak you out every once in a while. Like if you're running through and you're brushing through all that grass, you're bound to get a stonefly or two that's going to make its way from your legs or what have you and head up to your shoulders, kind of the highest point. And sometimes you'll feel them kind of crawling up on your neck. Freaks you out a little bit here and there, but after a while you get used to it. But they're harmless as far as being on you. No worries there whatsoever. They're just trying to crawl around and do their thing. So you don't have to worry much in that respect.
I heard you talking about rattlesnakes, about bears.
There are black bears down there, but I've seen one in like 6 years. They're not very common, but
Watch this
generally-
guy take a seat. There you are.
There's mountain lions that are known in the area, but same thing. You never deal with them. They're always kind of back in the areas that humans aren't for the most part.
I know I got too many questions, but showers, something, I like to drink cold beer at night. My wife likes to drink a glass of wine at night. Talk about
You
that.
got it. We're coming up on all that, man.
Okay, I'll hush. Thank you.
So check out all the general information here. So accommodate, we'll have 6 to 8 anglers, 8 at the most that we can have. Getting a lot of people asking me about this trip, so we may end up doing 2 trips on it. Already talked about the trout there, 2 anglers per tent, we got a cots, 2 anglers per guide. Already talked about the compost. Actually, let me get this going again here. Slideshow. So the compost toilets, already talked about that. Already talked about the line, the rods, lines, tippets. So I did the average temperature for May in Madras. High was 70 and the low was 36. So it's probably going to be, 40s, not, this is the average. So we're going toward the later of the month. So you might as well figure, maybe 40s at night.
It does get chilly, so definitely be prepared to have something warm to wear at night. Usually when you're in your tent or in your sleeping bag, it's not that bad, but when you're kind of out and about for dinner, it's always nice to at least be prepared to have some layers to make yourself comfortable. And one thing too, definitely don't hesitate to, like the guides generally always are out there sleeping out under the stars. So if you enjoy, that sounds appealing to you by any means, I'd say it's well worth it because there's virtually no light pollution down there. And especially kind of that time of year, you can get a beautiful, beautiful sight of the stars at night. And that's always kind of nice.
Don't have to worry about the rattlesnakes curling up in your sleeping bag, do you?
No, since you got the cots, you can pull the cots out of your tent, and there's generally a sleeping pad that's on the cot itself. Bobby will cover this, but you're required to bring your own sleeping bag as well as a pillow. So if you want those two, pack them with you. There's enough like sleeping bags these days, packed so small. It's easy enough for travel. And then there's so many travel or camping style pillows that are very minimal that pack into literally bags this big, and then you can just blow them up, or whether they have a memory foam or not. But for the most part, like we would just always, one thing to mention as well, they will provide a dry bag for you, and it's usually a backpack style. And you can put all your clothes, your sleeping bag, everything in there. With that being said, what will happen is you'll take out everything you need for the day with you. So it helps to bring like a separate little, whether you have a fishing backpack or something of that nature where you can keep all your things that you need during the day. And essentially at night, what they'll do is they'll take that dry bag that you have with all your clothes and sleeping bag and everything, and they'll put that in the boat that goes down to camp. So you can kind of count on everything you don't need for the fishing day is going to be at camp ready for you once you get down there.
Okay.
And one thing I'll say too is it's nice to bring just a rain jacket. Occasionally you do get little rain spurts that come through. They generally don't stick around, but you might have a little rain shower that comes through for a little bit. So it's nice to have a jacket to stay dry. And I always pack that in my fishing bag, and when it pops up, you're covered.
So what's included in the trips on the water meals, on the water accommodations, the guides, rods, reels, flies? You can bring your own if you want to. Camping gear, dry bag, as he talked about. What's not included, we already talked about some to and from transportation to the put in site. Alcohol, Frank, bring all you want. The guys will, the people will take
You got
it
an extra
down.
boat? You got an extra boat?
The
All you
guides
got, if you want
themselves,
to get a keg, Frank, the water be cool, so we can just set the keg out in the water.
Hide off the boat.
I'm looking after Gordon.
Oh, okay.
each
So
guide boat will
waiters,
Remember, Frank,
waiters,
I drink real beer, not the watery stuff.
so waders and boots, if you want those, you ask about those. So the fishing license, they don't have like a 3 or 4 day license. You have to get a 7-day. So a 7-day license, $94, or you can just get an annual for 110. If you want to, if you're going to go out there, you stick around out there and go fishing again somewhere else, you might as well get the annual. It's only what, $16 more. Guide gratuities, sleeping bag and pillow. Talked about that already. The vehicle shuttle, they'll shuttle your car down from the put in place and it'll be waiting for you at the takeout location. And that's $85 per shuttle. Landon talked about the boaters pass. That's how they limited how many people can be out on the river. That costs $25. And
Is
then
that
any of your personal items right there.
the boater pass per boat
it's generally broken down per person.
per person? Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else on here, Landon, that you want to mention that I don't have?
No, and just to touch again on, because I know asked about the shower. So in that instance, there are no specific showers to utilize, but best thing that we used to do is just bring kind of those, you can buy like the wipes at the store. And if you just want to kind of freshen up, if you will, having those wipes with you and give yourself a little rub down and get cleaner that way. But generally speaking, I mean, yeah, most of us you're just being out in nature for 4 days and enjoying
Go
that. But
take a
if you're,
dunk in the river, man.
that's true. Yep. Usually that time of year, being that the temps were in the 70s, there was a lot of times like during lunch, we'd go take a swim, or once you get to the camp at night, a lot of those areas have a little bit of a swimming area that you can go hop in and rinse off.
A man wants to smell like a man.
There you go. Fish downstream for me, please. Any questions on what's included and what's not included? And then we got the price next.
Nope.
So the 2024 rate is 2640. They haven't released the 25 rate, but we just said expect a 5 or 10% increase over that right there. So less than $3,000, $2,800, $2,900, somewhere right there. Payment will be 50% to book it, and then 50%, the final 50% at 60 days before the trip. And as soon as we get those prices, as soon as they get it from the outfitter for 2025, we'll pass it on. But expect a 5 or 10% increase over that 2640. So still $3,000 or less trip right there.
I'm counting on Trump getting elected and prices going down. I don't know about you guys.
Okay, I'm with you.
So Julie, I think Julie and I got some interest in this thing. So when do you
Okay.
need to know and so forth, so on?
I mean, so what we got, I mean, we can take 6 or 8 people, right? So as soon as I get 6 or 8 people, at that point, if I still have more interest, I'm going to try to grab another trip. But I mean, Gordon's going, I'm going to go. Jan, I think I don't see Jan anymore. I think Jan's,
I'm still here. I want to go.
yeah, Jan's going. So I mean, literally, if me, Jan, Gordon, Kirby, you guys go, that's 6 people right there. And then we add somebody else if we want to. Or at that point, if we got
Pencil
more, then
us-
we'll add on to try to grab another trip. I'll try to do another trip.
Pencil us in. I think we want to do it.
All right.
I've
And
already
then,
told Bobby I'm in.
I'm
yeah,
in.
so what we'll do is we're gonna put Kirby in also just to save her a slot, Gordon, because I
Yep.
think and so that'll be 6. We may, Mike Gooden's interested. He's over in Iceland right now. So I think we'll have other people interested, but we can get 6 and say we got the trip. And then, Landon, what I'll do is I'll send you everybody's email address. You can go ahead and send out. Now Jan had a question, and if Kirby goes, he may work out because, Jan, if you go and I go, I'll sleep outside. I'll sleep out under the stars. You can have the tent.
Well, we'll work it out. That's fine. Or
Yeah.
I may want to sleep outside and
All right.
in the fresh air. So
Okay.
we'll make it work.
Okay. Gotcha.
And depending on what they do, sometimes when we ran into this situation where you had kind of just as far as the dynamic of men and women, we would bring like another separate easy tent to set up. And usually, depending on who wanted that little single tent, you could do that as well. So I just don't know specifically how the Rentons do that, but I think it's a possibility, just to put that out there.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. So then any more questions before we, Landon, by the way, you've done an excellent job, man. I greatly appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Spent a lot of time down there, so it comes easy, but
There you go.
it's a really, really cool trip. I think you guys will really enjoy it. I haven't been back down there in quite some time since I started working for Flywater, but there's not a year that goes by that I don't think about that river. It's a special place.
So Julie and Frank just texted me, their battery went down on their computer. They was down in the garage, so they dropped off, but it's not that they're not interested. So Landon, what I'll do is I'll send you all 6 emails. And then if you'll put the package together for us, and then I don't know who gets the pricing. I guess you guys need to start pressuring the Rentons to go ahead and get us the pricing, because we got 6 right here ready to roll.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll get on that.
Okay. Any Gordon or Jan, any questions for Landon before we sign off here?
Not for Landon, but Bobby, are you going to send us this presentation just so we have it?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. I'll
Okay,
send it to
good.
you.
Thanks.
I'll send it. And then you can send it out to Kirby. I'm also, I'm copying it right now too. I mean, I'm recording it too, so I can send you the recorded version of it.
Okay.
Yeah, then we send it to Kirby whenever she
But I
gets
think,
back.
at least just having the presentation itself just kind of reminds me the price, the dates and stuff like that is helpful.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send you the presentation also. No problem with that.
One quick question for Landon. On one of those slides, it said something about hiking after you fish.
Yes. So Bobby and I talked about this as well. There are certain campsites that lend themselves to some little hikes that you can make up on kind of the public land there. And my suggestion to him was to let everybody know, if you are interested in that, it doesn't hurt to have a pair of shoes or hiking boots that provide ankle support, because some of them, like being a canyon, obviously there's some gradient there, and there's some areas that you can actually hike up along the canyon walls, and then you can get up on top of where the canyon stands. And if you want to do that, it's really, really cool. There's some areas that as you get up there, just gives you a big wide berth of what the river's doing, and you can kind of see the other areas that are around you. But yeah, I always warn people that you want the best ankle support that you can get, because it's a lot of just kind of some of the trails are fairly defined, but a lot of it's like kind of your scree rock and stuff that can slip underneath you, and not always easy to walk or hike on. So that's always something very nice to have. But again, it just depends on where you're staying specifically.
Right.
That might dictate how much hiking you can do. And there is a BLM service road that runs a portion of the river. There's a good stretch that they call the Wild and Scenic, where it is, for the most part, not a lot of people residing in that area. It's just untouched. And then you'll get down into some zones where there are some houses and stuff of that nature that are alongside the river. A couple of them that are fairly historic, that have been there for a long, long time. They were homesteads back in, I think, like probably in the 1800s is when they were started, and that land that the homestead was on has been just passed down generationally or sold off, what have you. But overall, that's kind of the big thing. And then there is, now that I'm thinking about it, there is a stretch of the river as well that there's a train that runs all the way up. So with that, kind of a funny story back in the day is there's the Pacific Union Railroad, and then I forget the name of the other railroad, but it started down in Maupin, and from Maupin all the way up, they had these two different railroad companies on each side of the river. And it was essentially whoever made it to Madras first got to keep their railroad. So they were competing, and as they were moving up the river, it was just kind of like Looney Tunes, where you had various sides like playing pranks on each other and trying to sabotage the other. They would gather a bag of rattlesnakes and throw it in the other camp. There was instances where I guess at one point dynamite was being utilized to sabotage the other side, and it was quite crazy. But ultimately, the Pacific Union ended up making it to Madras first, so they got the rights to keep their railroad there. But do expect that you'll see some trains coming through. They usually pass pretty quick, but then at night, sometimes you'll get a little wake-up call where, depending on where they're coming through, they have to actually signal that they're turning a corner.
Yeah.
And you'll hear that train horn. It's quite loud in some areas, but it's usually one of those things that wakes you up, and then you're like, oh man, that was loud, and then you go right back to bed. And then if you were like a lot of us guides, you just got so used to it that you'd sleep right through it. And then the anglers in the morning be like, oh man, did you hear that train at 3 a.m.? And like, nope, slept right through it.
Sounds like Wesley's place, doesn't it, Gordon?
That's what I was just thinking as well.
Yeah, so also, Gordon, check out Bend, Oregon. It's like 30 minutes south of Redmond. I mean, that's a really cool place. We got some personal friends out there. Heather's going to go out with me on this trip, and then we're going to hang with them for a bit. But there's all kinds of hiking around Bend. Bend's kind of a mini or smaller version of Boulder. So it's a really cool place. A lot of beer, a lot of breweries, a lot of hiking, various things like that there.
Yeah, I've
If
already
you're-
been looking at some of the hikes, and I think, Kirby and I may go out a day or two early to do some hikes, and then land in what you just described about, hiking up some of these canyons would sell her.
Nice. And Bend, I lived in Bend my entire time while I was there. It's a very, very cool city, a lot going on. Like Bobby mentioned, if you're a beer aficionado, I think they have like some of the highest breweries per capita residing in Bend. A lot of good ones down there. Boneyard's one of my favorites. Deschutes is a flagship. They started back in '88 down there. And then you got 10 Barrel, and you got Sun River Brewing, really, really good one. There's a ton, a lot of cool stuff to do, and great fishing in and around Bend as well. So the upper Deschutes River flows right through Bend. So there's that going on. A lot of folks that are floating it kind of in town, right through the stretch there. But if you hop into any of the local fly shops, there's some good ones down there, like Confluence Fly Shop. There's Fly and Field, that's another one. And then Bend Fly Shop's another one in there. So you hop into there, they'll hand you a map and send you on your way if you want to go play around a little bit before you go down. But brown trout are primarily reside in the upper Deschutes as well as the red sides. There's a couple stretches about an hour outside of town in the upper Deschutes that have brook trout. State record came out of there. I think it was roughly 9 pounds,
Wow.
or 8.9, somewhere in there. But a really, really big brookie. And one river, if you have time, that I would suggest going to see outside of Bend. It's actually if you head out towards Sisters, and it's about 45 minutes. It's called the Metolius, and it is an absolutely gorgeous. Technically, it starts out as a spring creek, but it's just chin clear, very, very cold. Usually, it's right around like 46 degrees, but it's an absolute gorgeous, gorgeous river, and well worth the trip to make it out there if you can.
And how far is it from, say, Bend to Crater Lake?
That's a little bit of a jaunt. You're heading south, whereas this is further north. You're heading south, and to get to Crater Lake, I think it's right around maybe 2 hours.
Okay.
Mount Hood's about 2 hours the opposite direction, isn't it? North?
Correct. Yeah, 2.5 hours to Crater Lake from Bend proper, about 100 miles.
Okay. I may have to spend 2 weeks out there.
Yeah, we're going to spend some time out there.
Cool spot.
All right. Anything else, Jan or Gordon? Landon, awesome job, buddy. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And then I'll send you everybody's you and copy you and Max on everybody's email address, and he's familiar with, like I said, all these guys are going to Canada here in July, up there. So we're doing the East Slope up in Canada in July. So I'll send these in, and so you guys can go ahead and start setting it up for us.
Perfect. Well, have fun in Canada. That'll be awesome.
All right, guys. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.